Thank you, Felix, and thanks to the organization of the third summit. Thanks for setting everything, and it demands a lot of work, and also great that the light is back. And, well, but it would have been also interesting a little bit more darker, but never mind. So, I mean, this paper, or it's actually a research, came about because I was requested some years ago an article about archives in Latin America, video archives in Latin America, for this book, which has just been published this year, which is called Encounters in Video Art in Latin America. But okay, yes, I could have written something, but I said I'm gonna do a more extensive research than just writing something around archives in Latin America. So I did several interviews and surveys that I'm going to talk about, because the thing with media art, I'm not going to be focused this time in media art in general, but I'm going to be much more focused in video art. I mean, they've been circulated and they achieved significant visibility over the decades, and they are now part of private collections, museums. And there's been more than 4 decades of festivals, exhibitions, laboratories that played a key role also in the proliferation of the production of works, as well as the dissemination. And even though there was an initial lack of interest in acquiring these works from just over a handful of museums, as well as there was in any case a very urgent need to organize the materials and prevent them from becoming technologically obsolete. So that led to the first video art collection, let's say, archives. There is certain degree, as I'm gonna show, of institutionalization. But the interesting thing here is that they are trying to recover and recognize the value of the audiovisual materials that were often abandoned or in a precarious state of conservation. These investigations inevitably are connected to a sustained group of works, essays, publications that had incorporated the historical study linked to video and media art, demonstrating just how imperative it is to have local video art archives, because all these publications that I'm showing are based on research, and for that research you need those archives. So beyond the specific characteristics that are inherent in the local region, one must also consider that video itself, as we discuss here and we will continue to discuss, is a medium and a technique that poses 2 significant challenges. The first, the conservation of magnetic and digital formats has certain requirements that differentiate it from film. There are dozens of formats and codecs, which there are hundreds or thousands sometimes. So which make it more fragile as the years pass. And second, that the audiovisual works are difficult to organize because archival systems were originally designed to catalog museum collections in many cases. I mean, I'm talking about how they catalog mostly this material. However, I mean, they primarily contain still images. So video inhabits spaces and problems that bring it closer to other domains, closer to audiovisual practices, more than the art world, let's say. These were some of the assumptions that underpin the research that I did. So I mean, which attempts to establish this preliminary map of institutions, organizations, and personal initiatives associated with the preservation and cataloging and dissemination of video art in Latin America. So I did these interviews and surveys and email correspondence, in-depth interviews, and I've been updating this this work. I mean, not constantly, but I've done it a couple of times. So I started in 2019, and I've been updated some of the information last year. I spotted 4 models within what I found talking to festivals, to museums, to people, and to curators. So one is the archive as a necessity. So basically connected to the video art festivals and their archives, the archiving conversation, which has to do with museums and institutions. sustained and unsustainable initiatives, basically the personal archives, how people are dealing with their own archives. Sometimes even they are trying not just artists, but also individuals. And the latest incarnation of the work in archive is what I call the expanded archive, which are basically exhibitions as means of research. So I'm going to go very fast around each of them, and I'm going to put only some few examples. So, I mean, Video Brazil, which was founded in 1983 by the Brazilian curator Solange Vargas. I mean, it has a collection of 14,000 magnetic tapes, 1,100 by Latin American artists. Video Brazil has digitalized all their collection. And let's say that they've been doing this systematically. In 2001, they started something called let's say, sort of second stage, which involved the classification of the material and the digitalization. And then they open it as an online database, which is available with photographs, I mean, data about artists, people, I mean, the whole data about the festival and the work that were presented are there. But now they are working on what they call the third stage of their archives, which is basically they are trying to understand critically the limitations of archival classification. So they've been, let's say, working on an exhibition what was called "Are We All Black Now?" And why? Because this brought that meanwhile they were looking for some Black artists. There is an important Black population in Brazil. They were looking for Black artists in the collection. There were no ways of cataloging, or they were not cataloged through the color of the skin. So that posed another discussion around, not only around the lack of that type of identification, but also Daniel Lima, who was the curator of that project, revealed that there was a very small number of artists of African descent which were represented in the collection. So I mean, it's interesting how these types of archives also start to problematize their own archives. Another video art festival of note was the Festival Franco Latinoamericano de Video Arte, which was first held in Santiago de Chile as the Franco Chileno Festival from 81 to 92. And that played a very essential role in the region as a space for freedom of expression during the military coup or dictatorship of Pinochet. And then it expanded to Buenos Aires and to Montevideo and Bogota. And thanks to Pascal Gallet from the French government, they were able to recently donate the copies of the copies of the videos of these festivals to the National Fine Arts Museum in Santiago and the University 3 de Febrero in Buenos Aires. So it's interesting because also that festival enabled the creation of the Media Art Biennial in Santiago de Chile, which established already several initiatives around archiving that I'm not going to go through, but basically they have a video archive, but also they have an award, which is a Juan Downey Award, and they established this open media library. In Central America, which is another case worth pointing out, it's interesting because there is a much more unifying phenomenon, which happens that with the Museum of Contemporary Art, where they had they organized a competition and an exhibition called Restless Image, Imagen Inquieta, for many years. So the whole archive is there, and that's another extremely valuable archive. So the second strategy that I'm gonna mention quickly is what I call the archiving conversation, and it's basically how video was, as I was mentioned before, bitterly an important medium for maintaining this critical and optimistic spirit in Latin America, particularly during the military regimes in the 70s. So there were lots of dictatorships at that time. So when video served in a way as an instrument for liberation and memory, and as a vehicle of international dissemination at a time where many artists were living in political exile. One very important case was the Museo de Arte Contemporánea of the University of Sao Paulo. They carried a groundbreaking project in the region initiated by Walter Zanini and facilitated equipment for experimentation to many artists like Roberto Evangelista, Paulo Herkenhofer, Leticia Parente. I want to talk a little bit more about that because there was a recent dissemination project. This is another project that we've been working on in Peru, which is it's a bit more recent, but basically it's our archive, the archive of ATA, along with the archive of the Museum of Art, which are the two largest video collections. We are putting the catalog together. So that meant a better integration of the information. The third initiative are these unsustainable initiatives. So people like in the case of Archivideo, which is an independent initiative to systematize video in Argentina, or Jimena Cuevas, who has dealt with her archive, but at the same time she has videos from many artists in Mexico, and she's rebuilding the history of video in Mexico through her work. And the last, I'm gonna be very fast, but there is this new phenomena, this final model, which is becoming increasingly common, not just in Latin America, but in general, which is the establishment of audiovisual archives, which are in a way connected to exhibitions based on research and investigation on video material. So, I mean, there's been many cases, and I'm gonna go very fast, but this was one regarding our archive in Peru, the Archive of ATA. This was an amazing exhibition on video art in Colombia, an extensive research since its beginning. This was something similar around not just video, but also experimental film in Uruguay. This is the exhibition during the pandemic. The University of Sao Paulo did this exhibition with the material from the 70s. And that was a very interesting and valuable resource of information. And quite recently, and this is very interesting, they found lots of, in this case, printed media that were kept for decades during the dictatorship of Pinochet in the Museum of Fine Arts. They spotted, because all the collections in Chile are integrated in a database. So they spotted them first in the database, and through that information, they went to the storages. They found the documents that were supposedly lost, and they did this exhibition, which is also another way of picking up things, but through the use of the database. That's pretty interesting. And yeah, and well, this is a recent also project that we did. Again, this is what we film material that we digitized around the 70s, which there is a catalog here about that exhibition, but everything is online at ATA's website. And just to wrap up, there was this other exhibition recently on the Festival Franco-Chileno that I mentioned, picking from all these videos that were brought back from France. So, I mean, these are basically the main conclusions. I just want to close up very briefly. The four models allow us to identify several recurrent situations, as well as working practices on occupational cultures in video archives in Latin America. One of the main findings is that many video archives are still scattered. In addition, important preservation and dissemination initiatives operate under administrative models with very precarious means to sustain its availability. And although video art has perhaps blatantly been incorporated in museums and collections, there are still much work to do in terms of recovering works and creators that are abandoned, particularly those that emerged in the region in the final decades of the 20th century. So, I mean, there is this also institutional limbo, because the type of cataloging of the museums are perhaps not the best ones. So these are some of the discussions that are being confronted, and once more, how we can use those archives. And I think we saw some cases also before this presentation around how we can bring these archives towards a critical reflection, because archives demand a lot of work, demand a lot of maintenance, but they are useful when we apply them for today's problems, today's points of view, when we can read them from a contemporary perspective. Thank you.